How's it going, guys? My name is MrHurriicane, and today I'm going to be recapping the Carolina Panthers franchise Season 1 offseason, which I live streamed early this past week. If you missed the live stream and still want to watch that long version of the offseason, the link to Part 1 is in the description below, and you can get to Part 2 of the offseason from that video. Combined, the two parts are a little over 2.5 hours, as the offseasons always go longer than I think they're going to. The off-season streams are always a lot of fun, and with this being the first off-season in the series, it was a very important one. It was very important not only because it was the first in the series, but also because there are a lot of veterans on this team who were signed one-year contracts, and then of course the expiring contract of quarterback Cam Newton. The plan was definitely to re-sign Cam Newton. I thought he had a good season. It wasn't great, but our offensive talent really isn't anything to brag about. We don't have the offensive line I want. We need more playmakers on offense. And on defense, we have some very good key pieces with Tulele, K'Wan Short, Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis. Despite some of the pieces we have on both sides of the ball, there is a lot of work to do, and this offseason was going to be basically my first chance to really start piecing together the roster that I want. With that being said, let's jump into this offseason recap. The New England Patriots are the Super Bowl champions heading into Season 2, and all this gameplay here was captured from my PS4, and because I was streaming straight from the PS4, you're going to see the webcam and the comment count and the viewer count, so you'll get some reactions, at least visually. But anyway, the first priority was definitely to re-sign Cam Newton, and I knew it wouldn't be cheap. Cam wanted a 6-year, $131 million contract, and I was willing to offer a $132 million contract with $42 million guaranteed in the signing bonus, and Cam Newton accepted. So no quarterback controversy, no mad scramble to find someone in the offseason. Cam Newton is our quarterback heading forward. Next up was Mario Addison, who played a good year alongside our very talented defensive line. However, he was going to test free agency. One of the players who struggled was Byron Bell. I was willing to keep him as a backup. I offered him a very low contract, and he declined my offer. Moving forward, Brian Folkert's backup center. We need some good offensive line depth. I like Brian Folkert's. He still needs to develop, but he accepted the 2-year offer. Then there's Taj Boyd, our third-string quarterback, whom I like as a backup to Cam Newton. He beat out Joe Webb in last year's preseason, and we were able to keep him for very cheap. Next up, Malcolm Bronson, one of the players I signed to compete in last year's preseason. I liked the way he played and wanted him to stick around. There's Chase Blackburn, one of the veterans I really wasn't tied to. I thought with the injury to Thomas Davis, the multiple injuries actually, that A.J. Klein played alright and he can replace Chase Blackburn. So here you see everybody who is not re-signing with us. There are 11 players right here. I still wanted to try to get Mario Addison back, but otherwise, I really wasn't too concerned about any of those other free agents. We're about to get into unrestricted free agency, as we can see some of the deals that have already gone down, like the Saints keeping Jimmy Graham, but the Cowboys unable to keep Dez Bryant. Ndamukong Suh is staying with Detroit, and the Patriots slapped the franchise tag on Nate Solder. However, in free agency, I wasn't expecting to spend a lot of money. I mean, $32.5 million of cap room is enough to go out and get some players, some very good ones. However, I know that with Cam Newton's cap number only going up from here, still having to re-sign Luke Kuechly, Tulele, K'Wan Short, I had to play this very conservatively. And much of the chat wanted me to go out and go after DeMarco Murray or Randall Cobb, and they didn't want as big of contracts as I thought they would, but still, the cap numbers are only going up for those 4 players if we can keep all 4 of those players. This draft class was going to be very deep at receiver, and both receiver and running back are positions I feel confident filling in the draft. But I was willing to go out and sign Andrew Whitworth. I offered him a 2-year contract. He's another veteran, so it's not a long-term fix. But I knew we needed 2 tackles, and so this would at least give us a little bit more flexibility at the top of the draft. Another need right now is cornerback, and there were a few good ones in free agency like Prince Amukamara, but I was still playing it safe and didn't offer any contracts to corners. Safety is another big need. Thomas Deku did not play well this past year, but it's mainly just veterans who were available, and I had some targets in the draft. We go back to Mario Addison now. He wants a 4-year contract, and I was willing to offer that to him. I'd like to keep him around in all 4 of our defensive line starters. In between rounds of free agency, I did a little bit of scouting as our biggest needs were at receiver, tackle, and in the secondary, either corner or safety. We need those 4 positions mainly. It was a very deep receiver class, and I thought one of our big priorities should be to get a playmaker to pair up with Kelvin Benjamin, and there were a lot to choose from. Here was a 5th round prospect I liked a lot, who isn't a big-bodied receiver. He's more of a slot receiver with some speed and some definite make-you-miss ability. Here's Lance Adams, more of your prototypical outside receiver at 6'4", 220. I liked him a lot, and there was also Parker Morgan, who's more in that Kelvin Benjamin mold, and I didn't want another Benjamin necessarily. I wanted more of a speed threat. There was a lot of good tackles in this draft, and Graham Hale was one of my favorites, and there were a couple safeties I liked a lot. Jameek Baxter, who wasn't as good of a tackler, but then further scouting on safety Richie McRae, who already had good speed and coverage ability, showed adequate tackle ability, and he can hit. This is my kind of safety right here, and he became the #1 safety on my hypothetical board. Outside linebacker wasn't a huge need, but I was still looking at some players because Thomas Davis is in his 30s. Trey McKnight's more of a run-stopping linebacker. Wasn't sure he'd be a 3-down guy. And then there was Bob Butler, who's more athletic and definitely intriguing. I wanted to get some competition at running back, and Stephon Rhodes was a late-round prospect I liked a lot. 4th-round cornerback prospect Ralph Hendricks was already someone I was keeping my eye on. He would need some development, but there's some very good traits here to work with. We go back to free agency now, and I wanted another tight end. I let Ed Dixon walk, and why not offer a contract to veteran Antonio Gates? And then at cornerback, how about Dre Kirkpatrick, who hit the free agency market? I offered him a deal. At the end of free agency, we had signed Andrew Whitworth and Antonio Gates. It doesn't show it here, but we also retained Mario Addison. Good news around the league, we no longer have to play against Cam Jordan twice a year, as the Colts gave him a big deal. However, the Buccaneers signed Nick Fairley, and they'll pair him up with Gerald McCoy. That won't be fun. Roddy White is also now a Minnesota Viking. We are approaching the draft, a little bit more scouting to do, as I found a very intriguing guard prospect, George Azur. He's very strong and a very good run blocker. Safety still in need. I wanted to find some more prospects outside of the first couple rounds. Here's Devon Pruitt, who is another big hitting safety. Now looking at speed, and it looks very good. However, awareness, he would need some work. Scouting is now over, and now for the biggest event of the offseason. It's time for the NFL Draft. The Panthers pick 23rd overall and have 1 pick in each round. The Jacksonville Jaguars, with their first pick, take DeVaris Turner to get the draft underway. Let's move ahead to our first division rivals pick. The Atlanta Falcons take Charlton Solomon, a very big and athletic pass rusher. Brendan Patton's the first receiver to go off the board to St. Louis, and the Titans took another receiver. However, like I said, this was a very deep receiver class. The Raiders take the first cornerback, Derek Snow. The Bengals take a quarterback, Carrick Poteet. The Buccaneers on the clock, they take a defensive lineman as well, Miles Wolfe. And continuing the trend, all 3 of our rivals took defensive linemen in the first round. And that brings us to the first pick for the Carolina Panthers at 23 overall, but could we trade back and get some more picks? The 49ers wanted to move up from 31, but our best offer was from Indianapolis, who was the pick right after us, and so we could gain a 3 by falling back 1 spot. I took that offer, and with the 23rd pick, the Colts took Richie McRae. He was one of the players I was targeting, and so we had to go in a different direction. Even though it was a deep receiver class, there was one I really liked, and our first pick ended up being receiver Lance Adams. Into the second round now, and the NFC South teams are still building up their front sevens. We near our selection, but the Eagles take Jameek Baxter, so the top 2 safeties I liked were both taken. Into our second round pick, and the Colts offered us another trade to move up, hoping they would not take the player I wanted, and they took a guard. I was not targeting him, I had never even scouted him. But the guy I wanted was still there. Olin Greco, left tackle prospect. With him and Andrew Whitworth, tackle was no longer on my radar. The Jaguars went and took George Azur, but I probably wouldn't take him in the 3rd round anyway. The Falcons went and took Corin Dawkins, a big 250-plus pound power back, so we're definitely going to see him. And for our pick, I was thinking defense in the third round. We'd already gone offense in the first two, and the two corners I like, Stan Gregory and Ralph Hendricks, were still down there on the board. However, Devon Pruitt was the top strong safety on the board, and so I took Pruitt. Last pick of the third round, and the New England Patriots take Ralph Hendricks. Another secondary player taken before I could have the chance to draft him. I wanted Stan Gregory. He was the top player on my board out of players that I had scouted. And just 4 picks before our 4th round selection, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers took Stan Gregory. All of my favorite secondary prospects were gone. In the 4th round, we took athletic linebacker prospect Bob Butler. We moved to the bottom of the 4th round, and I wanted to get that receiver I talked about earlier, Donovan Ashley, that slot receiver prospect. And of course, there was a run on wide receivers. Ashley was the 4th on the board, and with the Cardinals taking another one, I knew I had to try to trade up. I offered a 5 and a 6 to Denver, and they declined my offer. They took a linebacker. Now the Patriots, who had already taken Ralph Hendricks, but this time around they take a running back. Now we're into the 5th round. The Jacksonville Jaguars, I offered a 5 and a 7 to, and they turned me down to take a safety. I was determined to trade up. I offered the Lions a 5 and a 7 as well. And Detroit accepted, and so with our 5th round pick that we traded up for, we are going to take Donovan Ashley right here. He was the 3rd receiver on the board, and one I had liked for a long time. I scouted him early last season. Late 5th round, and the Buccaneers took a linebacker I liked, Stevie Parker, but we wouldn't have taken him anyway. At this point, we had 2 picks left, and I hadn't been able to address cornerback the way I wanted to. And out of the remaining cornerbacks, I hadn't scouted any of them. And so, I had to just take some risks here. I drafted Najee Small with our 2nd 5th round selection, and then in the 6th, I took another corner. Another player who I had no idea about his skill set, but he was 6'2", 182. We drafted D. Small in the 6th round. In the 7th round, the Falcons took another player I liked, Stephon Rhodes. He was a running back I was hoping to sign as an undrafted free agent. That concludes the Season 1 off-season draft. As you can see, all 7 of our picks right here. I did not address corner as early as I wanted to. All the secondary players I liked were taken ahead of our selections, and so the secondary is still a bit of a concern. Looking at some of our selections, 1st rounder Lance Adams, and he indeed has the speed I was looking for. And with that size, I can't wait to see what he can do on the outside. Olin Greco, our 2nd round pick, hoping he can be a potential left tackle of the future. He's a good pass blocker. We'll see how he plays. I mentioned Bob Butler's athleticism earlier, and it's definitely promising, but he needs a lot more development if he's ever going to be a starter for us. Both of the cornerbacks I drafted late are going to need development. I hope we have some good competition in the preseason, because I'm still very uneasy about our cornerback situation. At this point, I had forgotten that Thomas Deku wasn't on a 1-year deal, and I cut Thomas Deku. I did not like the way he played last year, and I was looking to replace him. Overall, we were able to fill some needs, but definitely not all of them. And early on, it looks like cornerback may be one of our biggest concerns. Player acquisitions do not end there. We signed a bunch of undrafted free agents and veterans to fill holes on the roster and to provide some competition in the preseason. You can see Charles Woodson. I signed a few veterans. Woodson was one of them. I also signed Travell Wharton. I got DeJuan Edwards back, and then, hopefully a cornerback who can help us out. I went out and signed Charles Tillman. I hope he can make a difference. Both Tillman and Woodson are longtime veterans. Charles Woodson still has a lot of ability, and hopefully he can fill in that starting safety spot. And then you have Charles Tillman, who has lost a lot of his speed, but the coverage ability is still there. Adding to the list of veterans I picked up, there's also Kevin Williams. I still may not be done tweaking this roster. With the Patriots selecting Ralph Hendricks, they have placed Alfonso Dennard on the trading block. He's 25 years old and has a lot of ability, and he may be a good acquisition for our secondary. There's also Josh Robinson, whom I'm mainly looking at because we don't have a lot of speed in our secondary, and that's something Josh Robinson has a lot of. With that, the offseason is complete. Next up is the preseason, but right now you're looking at the regular season schedule. And our last 4 games, look at that stretch right there. 3 of those last 4, all in the division, just like this past year. There are some very challenging teams outside of our division on the schedule, and I'm looking forward to kicking off Season 2. All 4 preseason games will be condensed into one video next time around, and then we'll move on to Season 2 in the Carolina Panthers franchise. We didn't get everything done in this offseason I was hoping for, but we definitely have some new intriguing players. And there were some undrafted guys I can't wait to see how they play in the preseason. Anyway, thank you guys for watching the video. Let me know in the comments section down below what you thought of free agency and our draft. Looking back, I wish I would have offered a contract to Tremont Williams or Brandon Carr, just someone who wanted a 1-year deal, because we would have had the cap space to make that move. Just like last year, we have a lot of 1-year contracts again. This roster building process will definitely take multiple off seasons, but we have some very young talent I'm excited to see in Season 2. The preseason is up next. Thanks for watching. Remember to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to leave your feedback and subscribe for more Carolina Panthers franchise. I'll see you guys next time in the preseason. Have a great day.